7 levels of disturbing movie endings. Level 1. Unsettling. The Mist, 2007. The Mist follows David Drayton, his wife, and young son, Billy Drayton, who live in a lakeside house in Maine when a massive storm tears through their property one night. The next morning, David notices this strange, unnatural mist rolling across the lake and decides to head into town with his son Billy and neighbor Brent to grab supplies from the supermarket. While they're shopping, the mist suddenly engulfs the entire town, and a bloodied man stumbles in screaming that something in the mist killed his friend. Everybody thinks the man is crazy until suddenly these massive tentacles burst through the loading dock and drag a bag boy screaming into the fog, ripping him apart while everyone watches in horror. As hours turn into days, David and a small group decide they'd rather face the monsters than stay in the supermarket, so they make a desperate run for his car in the parking lot. They drive for hours, seeing nothing but destruction, until the car runs out of gas and is surrounded by mist, with creatures closing in from all sides. Rather than let anyone suffer, David checks his gun and realizes he only has 4 bullets, but there are 5 people in the car, including his young son sleeping in the back seat. Everyone silently agrees on what needs to happen next. So David shoots his son first, then the other 3 passengers, one by one, until he's out of bullets, with none left for himself. He stumbles out of the car, screaming for the monsters to come kill him, and that's when he hears heavy engines approaching through the fog. Military tanks and trucks roll out with soldiers using flamethrowers to clear the creatures and rescue survivors. David collapses in the road, surrounded by the 4 corpses, including his son, as he realizes they were literally minutes away from being rescued by the military that's been clearing the area all along. Old Boy, 2003. This movie begins with a man named Odesu, who wakes up imprisoned in a windowless room with no explanation, just a TV and food delivered through a slot in the door. 15 years pass in that room before he's suddenly released onto the street, just as mysteriously as he was taken. He becomes obsessed with finding out why this happened to him, and during his search, he meets a young woman named Mi-Do, who helps him track down the man responsible, a wealthy stranger named Liu Jin from his distant past. After fighting through dozens of gangsters and pulling out his own teeth to send threatening messages, Dae-soo finally confronts Wu Jin and demands answers. Wu Jin shows him a slideshow of photographs, pictures of Dae-soo and Mi-do being intimate together, then reveals documents proving that Mi-do is actually Dae-soo's daughter, conceived before his imprisonment and raised separately without either of them knowing. Wu Jin engineered their meeting and watched them fall in love and consummate their relationship, all as elaborate revenge because, back in high school, Dae-soo witnessed Wu Jin having an incestuous relationship with his own sister and spread rumors that led to her suicide. Wu Jin spent 15 years making Dae-soo commit the same sin unknowingly, and after revealing this truth, he puts a gun in his own mouth and pulls the trigger, taking the secret to his grave and leaving Dae-soo as the only person who knows what he did with his own daughter. The endings on this level devastate you with pure psychological torment. You make every decision correctly and still destroy everything you love, but at the next level, we will get to see invisible horror manifest into something you can actually witness. Level 2. Disturbing. 7. 1995. This crime thriller follows Detective William Somerset, who is retiring in 7 days, and his replacement, David Mills, who has just arrived in the city with his wife Tracy. They hunt a serial killer staging elaborate murders based on the 7 deadly sins, force-feeding someone until their stomach bursts for gluttony, bleeding someone for a pound of flesh for greed, keeping someone tied to a bed for a year for sloth, and progressively worse deaths for each sin. After 5 murders, the killer, John Doe, walks into the police station covered in blood and surrenders, saying he'll reveal the final 2 bodies if Somerset and Mills drive him to a remote location. They agree, and drive to the desert, where a delivery van arrives with a package addressed to Mills. Somerset opens it, and his face drains of color. It's Mills' wife's head, and she was pregnant, though Mills didn't know. John Doe admits he murdered her that morning because he envied their happy life together, which is envy, the 6th sin. Now, if Mills shoots him out of rage, that's wrath, the 7th and final sin, completing the masterpiece. Somerset desperately begs Mills not to pull the trigger, but Mills is completely broken and shoots John Doe repeatedly in the head, while the killer dies smiling, having gotten exactly what he wanted by making Mills complete his artistic vision through murder. Eden Lake, 2008. A couple, Jenny and Steve, go camping at a remote lake for a romantic weekend, but local teenagers show up playing loud music and acting aggressively territorial. When Steve politely asks them to quiet down, they respond by slashing his car tires and stealing their supplies. So Steve chases them and catches one kid to scare him by tying him to a post. The kid's friends, led by a psychotic teenager named Brett, want revenge and start hunting the couple through the woods. They eventually catch Steve, tie him up, and Brett films on his phone while they stab Steve repeatedly, making sure Jenny watches her boyfriend die slowly. When Jenny escapes and runs through the woods for hours until she finds a house and pounds on the door, thinking she's finally safe when a family answers. But then Brett walks into the room. It's his house, his parents, and she just ran directly to her attacker's family for help. Brett's father realizes what his son did, but instead of helping Jenny, he chooses to protect his child, and the parents knock Jenny unconscious while the film ends, with the clear implication that they'll cover up the murders by killing her, too. The violence in this level is visible, with real consequences you can see on screen. But seeing violence is one thing. What if there was no escape at all? What if every door you opened just led deeper into the nightmare? Level 3. Shocking. Green Room, 2015. The movie Green Room follows a struggling punk band who take a gig at a remote skinhead bar deep in the woods. And after their set, one of them accidentally walks into the green room and witnesses a murder. A dead girl with a knife in her head. The club owner, Darcy, played by Patrick Stewart, locks him inside and says everything will be fine. But he's lying, and his skinheads systematically try to kill them. The band members die one by one in horrible ways. The first gets his arm slashed with a box cutter and bleeds out. The second gets mauled to death by attack dogs while screaming. The third takes a shotgun blast and dies slowly. Pat survives longest and manages to escape outside. But Darcy releases the dogs again, and they chase him through the woods, eventually catching and mauling him severely. He somehow kills both dogs, but he's been shredded and is bleeding from multiple wounds. He stumbles to the road, barely conscious, where Darcy finds him, and they stare at each other knowing Pat is dying from his injuries. Darcy simply walks away and leaves him there, and eventually a car stops to help, but the film ends without telling us if Pat survives, leaving this deeply unsatisfying ambiguity after watching him fight for survival the entire time. The Descent, 2005. This movie follows 6 women on a caving expedition in the Appalachian Mountains, including Sarah, who's dealing with trauma from her husband and daughter dying in a car accident. Her friend Juno organized the trip to help Sarah heal, but once they're underground, Juno admits she brought them to an unexplored cave with no maps and no rescue possible. The cave collapses behind them, trapping them, and they realize they're not alone. Blind humanoid creatures hunt them by sound. The women die one by one, brutally, as Sarah watches, and eventually she snaps and fights back, going feral and killing creatures with her bare hands. She finds Juno injured and learns Juno was having an affair with Sarah's dead husband, so Sarah wounds her and leaves her to die. Sarah appears to escape to the surface and drives away, but then she wakes up. It was a hallucination, and she's still trapped underground with dead friends and approaching creatures. If you love this breakdown, hit the subscribe button and stay here. Now, let's get back to it. The cave-in blocked the only exit, meaning there's no escape at all. Sarah starts screaming, and the creatures hear her, moving toward her position as the film ends, with her trapped forever, having survived everything just to die anyway. In this level, the violence is sustained with characters enduring hours of brutality, but the camera still cuts away from the worst moments. That protection disappears at the next level, when the film stops cutting away and forces you to watch every second. Level 4. Brutal. Bone Tomahawk, 2015. Sheriff Hunt and rancher Arthur O'Dwyer ride into the desert to rescue people who were kidnapped by what they discover are troglodytes, primitive, inhuman creatures living in caves. When they arrive, Hunt's deputy is already dead, but they find Arthur's wife, Samantha, alive, though injured. The troglodytes catch them, strip them naked, and tie them up. The leader points at their companion Nick, and the creatures drag him out naked and spread him flat on the ground. One troglodyte brings out a tomahawk, raises it high, and brings it down with tremendous force directly on Nick's pelvis between his legs. He does this repeatedly, splitting Nick in half lengthwise from the groin upward, while Nick screams in agony. Every single swing is shown in graphic detail, without cuts. You see the blade hitting, the body splitting apart, Nick's face contorted in unimaginable pain. The troglodytes eventually grab his legs and pull them apart in opposite directions, tearing his body completely in half into 2 pieces, while he's still somehow alive and screaming. Then he dies, and they immediately start eating his flesh right there. Hunt and Arthur fight back, rescue Samantha, but Arthur's leg is shattered, and he can't walk. Hunt has to leave Arthur in the cave with a gun, while he carries Samantha to safety, and the film ends with Arthur alone, surrounded by dead troglodytes, waiting with no guarantee Hunt will return before he dies. Megan is Missing, 2011. Megan is Missing begins with two best friends, Megan and Amy, who document their lives on video. Megan meets a dude named Josh online, chats with him for weeks, then agrees to meet in person, and disappears completely. Amy tries to find her, and Josh contacts Amy, claiming he wants to help. So she agrees to meet him, and he immediately kidnaps her. The film shifts to found footage from Josh's camera, showing Amy imprisoned in a basement. He brings out a barrel and focuses Amy to look inside. Megan's decomposing corpse is in there, dead for days. Amy screams uncontrollably. Josh puts a dog collar on Amy and assaults her while filming, and the camera doesn't cut away from this assault. Afterward, he orders Amy to climb into the barrel with Megan's rotting corpse, and she's hysterical, begging him not to make her do this. He forces her in anyway and seals the barrel shut with her inside, and you hear her muffled screaming. The camera shows Josh digging a hole in the woods, while Amy's screams continue from inside the barrel. He places the barrel in the hole and starts shoveling dirt on top, and the screaming gradually becomes fainter until it stops completely. He finishes burying them, passes down the earth, and walks away. The final shot is just disturbed earth, where two ladies are buried, one already dead and one who suffocated alive with her friend's corpse. In this level, the camera doesn't protect you anymore. It shows everything in explicit detail. But there's something worse than watching violence happen, and that is violence so extreme it stops resembling anything human. Level 5. Horrifying. Martyrs, 2008. Richard Grampier and Simon Trottier, Martyr, begins with 10-year-old Lucy escaping from a warehouse where she was tortured, and 15 years later, she tracks down the suburban family she believes was responsible. She shows up one Sunday morning and systematically executes the entire family with a shotgun. Her friend Anna arrives shocked, and while searching the house, Lucy starts seeing a creature attacking her, the physical manifestation of her childhood trauma. Unable to escape these visions, Lucy kills herself. Anna then discovers a secret basement chamber with a woman chained to a chair, who's been mutilated beyond recognition, skin flailed off in places, barely alive. Anna tries to help her, but the woman begs to die and eventually bites through her own wrist and bleeds out. Then cult members arrive and explain they create martyrs, people tortured so severely they transcend death and glimpse the afterlife. The previous woman failed, so now Anna becomes their new subject. They chain her in that chair and for days systematically beat her, starve her, keep her barely alive, while she screams and begs. Eventually, she stops fighting, and they escalate to the final stage, flaying her skin off piece by piece while she's fully conscious, and the film shows all of this in graphic detail. When she's achieved transcendence, Anna whispers something about the afterlife to the cult leader, an older woman whose eyes go wide. The leader gathers everyone to share this revelation, but before speaking, she puts a gun in her mouth and kills herself, taking the secret to her grave. The other cult members panic and run to Anna, asking what she saw, but she's just a skinless body strapped to a chair, barely alive and incapable of speaking. The film ends there. You watch hours of extreme torture with no meaning, no revelation, just violation. A Serbian film, 2010. This movie follows retired adult film star Milos, who desperately needs money and accepts an offer from director Vukmir to star in one final film for an enormous payment. Though Vukmir refuses to explain what the film is about, Milos shows up to set, where the scenes get progressively worse, and when he arrives to leave, Vukmir's crew restrains him and drugs him without his knowledge. The film shows what happens while Milos is drugged. He's forced to assault a woman while she's being unalived on camera, then a pregnant woman while she's giving birth, then the newborn immediately after it's born. Milos is so heavily drugged that he can't control his body or stop these actions. When he wakes days later, Vukmir shows him footage of everything he did, then reveals even more footage showing that Vukmir brought Milos home and filmed him assaulting his own wife and son in their sleep. Milos has destroyed his own family with his own hands on camera. He snaps and unalives everyone involved in making the film, then goes home and lies in bed with his wife and son. They take pills together choosing death as a family. The film's final shot shows a new crew arriving at the house, positioning cameras around the bedroom with the 3 corpses. Someone then gives orders to start from the beginning, while unzipping his pants and approaching the bodies, implying the cycle continues endlessly with new victims. The violence in this level escalates to complete degradation, where these films show the systematic destruction of human dignity and personhood. But there's still one level beyond this, which begs the question, what could possibly be worse than complete physical destruction? Level 6. Traumatic. The Girl Next Door, 2007. This movie is based on actual events in 1960s Indiana and follows orphan sisters Meg and Susan sent to live with their Aunt Ruth. Ruth starts punishing Meg for minor things, making her sleep in the basement, denying meals, and saying she's bad and needs correction. Ruth then goes as far as inviting neighborhood lowlifes to the basement and tells them Meg needs to be taught lessons, so they start hitting her with Ruth's encouragement. The abuse escalates over weeks. They tie Meg up, burn her with cigarettes, carve words into her skin with knives, and Ruth's own children participate enthusiastically. Susan tries to stop them, but Ruth ties her up too and forces her to watch. The guys begin assaulting Meg with Ruth supervising and giving instructions, and this continues for weeks while Meg remains chained in the basement. Eventually, Ruth decides Meg needs a final lesson about purity, so she has the guys hold Meg down while Ruth brings out an acetylene blowtorch. Ruth uses it to deliberately burn and destroy Meg's genitals, while the girl screams and passes out repeatedly, but they keep her conscious to experience everything. Afterward, they leave Meg chained there, seriously injured and infected, dying slowly over several days, while Susan watches helplessly. One of the guys finally tells an adult, and the police arrive, but Meg dies just as they come through the door. The film ends with text explaining Ruth got life in prison, but the guys only received probation and were never seriously punished for their crimes. Slow Torture Puke Chamber, 2010. This movie begins with a woman chained in a concrete room, and a masked man enters and systematically tortures her using methods designed to maximize pain while keeping her alive. He breaks her fingers one by one with a hammer, waiting between each to let her anticipate what's next. He uses pliers to pull out her teeth individually, then makes hundreds of small cuts all over her body with a razor, and pours salt in the wounds. She moves beyond screaming to just gurgling on her own vomit and blood. He cuts off her fingers, toes, and ears one by one, using a blowtorch to cauterize each wound so she doesn't bleed out, and by this point she's just a torso with a head, but somehow still alive and conscious. He forces a funnel into her mouth and pours waste and chemicals down her throat, making her choke and vomit repeatedly, but never quite killing her. The film doesn't end with her death. It ends with her still alive, still conscious in this destroyed state. The man leaves and turns off the lights, leaving her alone in darkness, and the camera stays on her for minutes watching her breathe. Then it cuts to black with the implication that she'll remain in that state indefinitely, with no escape possible. The films in this level push beyond entertainment into documentation of pure evil. Level 7. Nightmarish. Come and See, 1985. This movie follows 14-year-old Floria in Belarus, who finds a rifle and excitedly joins partisans to fight Nazis, seeing it as a great adventure, despite his mother's desperate pleas for him to stay. The partisans take his rifle and leave him at a camp doing menial work. Then German planes bomb the camp, and an explosion near Floria permanently damages his hearing. He returns to his village and finds everyone massacred. His family, neighbors, everyone dead in the mud. He finds another survivor, a girl named Glacia, and they watch as Nazis systematically destroy every village across Belarus, using the same methodology, rounding up all civilians and forcing them into barns, barring the doors, and setting the buildings on fire, while shooting anyone who escapes. Floria witnesses young ones burning alive, elderly women executed, little ones thrown into flames, and he's powerless to help. The Nazis catch him and torture him for fun, forcing him into a bog until only his head is above water, firing guns next to his ears while he's drowning in mud. He survives and joins partisans who eventually capture Nazi soldiers. The Nazis beg for mercy, saying they were following orders, but the partisans execute them all. Near the end, Flores shoots at a portrait of Hitler in the mud, while the film plays backward, showing Hitler's life in reverse, as a young man, teenager, child, baby. Floria aims at Hitler, but can't pull the trigger. The film snaps back to the present, and the final shots show Floria walking with partisans through snow, his face having aged 30 years in weeks, his eyes completely dead. No humanity left, just trauma in human form, walking because he hasn't stopped yet. The title, Come and See, references Revelation's four horsemen, suggesting this horror isn't an exception, but the normal state of human existence repeating eternally. Men Behind the Sun, 1988. This movie documents Unit 731, a Japanese biological warfare facility in World War II, while scientists used thousands of prisoners as test subjects. They deliberately infected people with plague, cholera, and anthrax to study symptom progression and time to death. They put prisoners in pressure chambers and increased pressure until organs ruptured, filming through observation windows. They froze prisoners' limbs and tested different thawing methods to see which caused more tissue damage. They hung people upside down to study how long it took to die from blood flowing to the head. They performed vivisections on fully conscious prisoners without anesthesia, removing organs one by one while filming reactions and taking notes. They infected women with venereal diseases and then dissected them to study the effects on reproductive organs. They tested grenades, flamethrowers, and chemical weapons on restrained prisoners at various distances. Thousands died through these experiments, and the film uses reenactments combined with actual archival footage, including real autopsy footage and medical procedures on corpses. At war's end, Unit 731 members weren't prosecuted because America gave them immunity in exchange for their research data. The film ends with text explaining no one faced consequences. Many became doctors and professors, died peacefully of old age, while honored in their communities. And their research gathered through torture and murder is still referenced in medical literature today. These final films don't provide resolution or justice. They simply document humanity's capacity for systematic cruelty without real consequences. So, which ending on this list went too far? Drop it in the comments. And thanks for watching.